In the newest episode of The Boys, and we've got a lot to cover, and honestly I'm super excited for the finale if this was the newest episode. The episode begins with this ode to Sesame Street, featuring Ryan and the puppet version of A-Train. The A-Train puppet starts going off into a propaganda song, spouting alt-right talking points like woke stuff and child indoctrination. Ryan isn't cool with this initially, but more on that later. We then see Sage entering the 7 room, obviously not having received the memo that the meeting was starting early, as Ashley is pitching NFTs to Homelander. Obviously, this episode was written before the crash, but it still comments on the Donald Trump NFTs. Homelander then interrogates Sage about the bug and who the leak is. Homelander grows angry and says they should just slaughter Butcher's whole team, something I initially thought that they were going to try to do for most of the season, but it turns out that they feared having the CIA come after them. After a bit more talking down to Sage, Homelander asks her to make sure that the shooter is ready to go on the 6th, something that we actually called in this video right here. So, haha. Anyway, we also see A-Train listening in on this meeting, being the actual leak. We then see the Deep talking to his octopus girlfriend, voiced by award-winning actress Tilda Swinton. When he gets a text from Sage, Deep then drops her back into her dirty tank, much to her protests. We then see Annie telling her mom to leave the country, the same thing that MM does later in this episode, as they know that Vought, or more specifically Homelander, will come for their families. We also see Huey copying the stuff that they have on Victoria as this whole thing is going on. To which we then hear Annie's mom talk about her abortion. Funny talk coming from her mom, who let Annie compete in a pageant with appendicitis and is probably the reason that Annie sabotaged Firecracker. She's not really blameless in any of this, so she's also probably the reason Annie doesn't even want to wear the Starlight suit anymore. With her mom training her to be a soup and her time in the 7, that suit has too much trauma wrapped up in it. We then see A-Train taking photos of Sage with some grungy looking guy who's been on too many dark forums. We see the boys discussing the photos when Butcher comes in and reveals to the gang that he's cooking up a new soup killer virus. Meanwhile, Kessler is trying to push him over the edge the whole time, and it's also been revealed that Butcher kicked Frenchie out of jail, needing his chemistry skills. We then see Ryan go to the Christmas tree, and in it, he sees a package with his name on it. Inside is a photo of his mom, Butcher, and Tara. Honestly, I'm not really sure how this got in the building. Did Butcher just mail this in and hope that no one looked too closely? I don't know. Theory for another time. Back at the boys' HQ, MM gives Butcher back the leadership position, much to everyone's protest. MM makes some good points. He's having panic attacks and needs to make sure that his family is safe. Speaking of family, in the next scene, MM is seen talking to his wife about his family leaving the country, just like what Annie did with her mom, to protect them. And to his surprise, she's cool with it, knowing how hard that MM is trying to protect them. It's honestly sweet to see. Back at the 7 Tower, we see Ashley is slowly cracking, feeling the guilt of Cameron Coleman's death that she was responsible for framing him with. We also learn that she didn't intend for him to actually die, but it was more to divert attention away from A-Train. A-Train then comes in and calms her down as Ashley is finally having all the pressures collapse in on her. We then have a scene where the boys are outside the shooter's apartment. Butcher and Kessler have a fight. It is also then revealed that Butcher had actually cheated on Becca, so it looks like a new angle to Butcher's guilt. Maybe one out of guilt for wronging her all those years ago? Maybe, but sounds a little too mushy, honestly. Back in the apartment, the boys find the detailed assignments for the January 6th plan, when they run into a woman who's locked up into a closet. This turns out to be a fake, a shapeshifter suit. Only this suit can copy you by looking into your eyes and having to peel off their skin like a chameleon after they shed their skin. But honestly, this looks more gross. Also, isn't someone going to notice all the blood? Won't the police get involved? Again, theory for another time. Back at MM's house, A-Train is giving him the high road conversation saying, "You convinced me to turn to a hero, now's your time." Also reminding him that Homelander intends to do this with the whole world, not just America. Back at the lab, we see Frenchie and Samir discussing the cure. The doctor, in not the best shape, protests, saying that he can't recreate the virus in this lab. Frenchie then one-ups him, saying he's made more complicated stuff in labs made from Goodwill items. Back at the 7 headquarters, Homelander and Firecracker are interrogating Webweaver, last seen on the floor chasing the dragon. This entire scene, Webweaver keeps spewing webs because he's nervous and not really giving Homelander much on Butcher. So after some additional thwips from down under, Homelander gets tired of this and rips him in half like a phone book. And honestly, one of the most brutal Homelander kills that I've seen yet. But I'll admit, DC did this better with King Shark back in the Suicide Squad. Also, Firecracker is traumatized by this, but she seems just fine later in the episode. So anyway, back in the lab, Frenchie and Kimiko discuss the awkward turn that the relationship has taken. She then reveals her mutism was because of some trauma that she had in her childhood. Frenchie and her reconcile with the realization that they both see themselves as monsters, but at least they aren't alone. Honestly, this whole storyline could have been done without the Colin drama and Frenchie turning himself in, but his relationship with Kimiko was already deep enough that this probably would have happened organically anyway if he just talked to her about what was wrong. I don't know. This is one of the weaker storylines this entire season, I'll admit that. Back at the 7 Tower, the Deep is having some trouble in paradise with his octopus lady. The argument doesn't go well, and the octopus dies in an honestly ridiculous death scene for a ridiculous situation. It also doesn't make sense that earlier in this same episode, the octopus was actually on the bed with him. So, like, could she survive without water, or can she not? I legit cannot explain this one. Anyway, moving on. The Deep, now thrown deeper, into his servitude for Homelander, is sent on a mission. Next, we see a surprise scene with Huey and Victoria Newman. Huey's bringing her some bodega chips reflecting on their work relationship from season 3. Huey then tries to reach through her, only to be met with a stone-faced Victoria, clearly set on doing this for, well, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure what her motivations are now. She hates Homelander, she wants to protect her daughter, but she already turned her into a soup and is going to be Vice President of the United States. I'm quite not sure what's keeping her on Team Homelander other than the promise of being the president? But back at the Flatiron building, we see the Deep catch the crew by the surprise. Although for a secret spy group, I wonder why they can't afford a Ring doorbell or something. Then again, Noir could have flown him through a window to bypass any security they do have. But also, they live in a world with flying superheroes. Why wouldn't you fortify that in the first place? Whatever, I can be here all day. The Deep and Noir are sent to kill the boys, and admittedly a cool fight scene happens between the boys and the bros of the 7. A-Train finally turns face and exposes himself as the leak. We then see Annie get her revenge on the Deep for the BS that he pulled on her in season 1. There's no other reason other than plot reasons why they couldn't have just killed him right there when she was done with him. He's probably gonna have a cool villain death in the last season. That is legit the only reason that I can think of that they don't curb stomp him right there. But then we see that A-Train run back and try to convince Ashley to leave now, that he has revealed himself as the leaker. Ashley then rejects this for some reason, maybe to try to do some good in Vought with the little amount of time that they have left than if she just ran away. The gang then meets up at a bar. They won the fight, but are still aware that there's going to be a bigger one coming. Tells his wife that he can't go with them just yet and that they need to finish what they started. Back at the 7 Tower, Homelander is upset that they learned about A-Train being the leaker. Sister Sage then enters, mad about her plans to send Dumb and Dumber to kill off the boys. A tense conversation happens between Sage and Homelander, which ends with her being fired. The bros are then seen walking the hallways of the 7 Tower, probably rattled and just saying bro. Sage is then figured out to be having a relationship with the both of them, but needing to lobotomize herself just specifically to have a relationship with the Deep. Back at the lab, Samir has made the virus, but in a weird desperate attempt, he stabs Kimiko with it and then hobbles away, to which Frenchie then has to recreate the bathroom scene in Saw to stop her from dying from the virus. The full gang then shows up, and they make a plan to make the virus and get Newman injected. Back at the Avenue Q ripoff, the characters then break into song with the A-Train puppet missing. Ryan is not comfortable and makes an announcement live on television, publicly denouncing the messaging that Vought is doing and having him be a part of it, signaling to Butcher that there is still hope for the kid. Butcher then rubs it in Kessler's face, then immediately powers down, showing Kessler still has some control. If you haven't noticed, Becca hasn't shown up in this episode. I think the way that it works in Butcher's mind is that she's the gentle bush that he needs. Meanwhile, Kessler is an aggressive car salesman trying to sell you on the financing and the warranty. He's all up in your junk about it. Next, we go into the Campbell household. Huey tells Annie that he went to Victoria's house to attempt to convince her to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Annie comes in with the Starlight uniform. She was initially very uncomfortable even looking at it, but then she just threw it on in this scene. She and Huey then do the do. Afterwards, we see a passed out Huey and an awake Annie. By the way, Huey shouldn't sleep like this unless he wants to wake up in the morning with some serious cottonmouth. We then see Annie open up the safe and gain the evidence against Newman. We then see the real Annie actually chained up in a dirty apartment, revealing to the audience that Annie was switched out after the fight at the headquarters, and the fake Annie is now running around, ending the episode. That was a lot. But what did you think about this episode and heading to the finale? Let us know in the comments down below.